Hey class, in today's lesson we want to ask ourselves, how does power plant produce energy? And then our objective for today is to explain energy, the transfer of energy, and acquisition of energy. So we are going to be focusing more on traditional energy for this video, whereas the next video we'll talk about alternative energy. Okay, so by the end of today's lesson, you will be able to explain how electricity is generated from thermal power plants using energy sources such as coal, natural gas, uranium, wind, and water. So before we begin, take some time to think about this. So increasing human population increases the demand for what? So there is really no right or wrong answer. I just wanted to get your brains thinking. So if you said things like food, natural resources, water supply, energy, jobs, for example, these are all good things that you could have used to fill these boxes on the right-hand side. Okay? So we're going to be talking about how electricity is generated at a power plant. So there's a video that's hyperlinked here that you're welcome to watch later, but for time purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and explain it to you. So essentially, there are these forms of energy: nuclear energy, biomass, coal, natural gas. These are all things that are then heated up in a power plant. They create steam in a boiler, and the energy that comes from this steam then powers this thing called a steam turbine, which is in the form of mechanical energy. It goes into an electrical generator, and then it creates electrical energy. So super quick, just to recap, heat energy, which is steam, that is transferred into a steam turbine, creating mechanical energy, which then powers an electrical generator, which creates electrical energy. Super simple. So we're going to talk about these traditional forms of energy, which were discussed in the last slide, because these are all ways that we can get electrical energy from and power a power plant with. So coal. So you guys probably have seen coal. Coal is a natural black or brown substance that is essentially from fossilized plants and animals. It's produced, or it's burned to produce steam, which then turns steam turbines, as we talked about in the last slide. But it must be mined from within the earth. So there are pros to this because coal is cheap. Coal is cheap. There's so much in the United States, and because of this, it also increases production, which will then lead to more jobs in the United States. For example, way back in the industrial ages that you guys might have heard about in history, coal mining was a huge job for individuals. And so coal has always been around. It's always been such a big deal. But it does have some cons. So cons are that burning coal can increase carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So we know that's super bad for our environment. It hurts our ozone layer, increases the greenhouse effect. And then ashes must be stored, which can then lead to water pollution, also another big downside. And mining damages the environment. So if we're digging into the ground, digging into mountains, we hurt our environment, which then in turn hurts the ecosystems and biodiversity. And coal is also non-renewable, so that means it can't be reused. So our next form of energy we've talked about previously, nuclear fission. So remember, fission is different from fusion in the way that fission, atoms split apart. So we're talking about uranium in this case. So uranium atoms are split apart in a reactor to produce massive amounts of energy, and they must be mined from the earth through underground or open pit mining. So this has a lot of pros too. It produces large amounts of energy. It's super reliable and it doesn't pollute the atmosphere, which is great, right? We're protecting our ozone layer. But there are cons because, you know, if we release a lot of harmful radiation, that could also not be good for individuals who live in the area, animals who live in the area, and the waste must be stored and protected because it contains harmful radiation. And then heat from the reactor can also damage local water systems. So this, of course, also has some downsides as well. So now we're going to move on to natural gas. Natural gas is also known as methane gas. It's kind of the things if you've got a gas stove, the things that come out of lighters. Methane gas is formed from fossilized plants and animals. It's found deep beneath the ocean crust or within this type of mineral called shale. And fracking is the process of obtaining methane by pumping high pressure water into the ground to break up rock and release methane gas. So pros of this is that it releases less carbon dioxide than oil or coal. So we're not quite hurting our atmosphere nearly as much, but we still are. And it burns cleaner than coal or oil. Same thing as last one. We're not really hurting our atmosphere as much, but it still does have that. And it's abundant in the US. There's tons of natural gas, tons of methane gas available. But cons, it's non-renewable. Construction of gas pipelines is really expensive, and fracking can be really bad for the environment. And then oil. So petroleum oil can be formed from fossilized plants and animals, similar to natural gas and coal. It must be pumped to the surface from deep within the crust, is burned to produce steam to turn turbines. So pros of this are it's a super versatile fuel. And then millions of people are employed in industries that process oil to create other products. So it's a big form of jobs, and it's also used in the creation of plastics. And our cons for this are it's non-renewable. Oil spills can kill plants and animals and also damage beaches. And it produces carbon dioxide when burned. So that also has some pros, also has some cons similar to the other ones. And then our last one is harvesting. So harvesting is one of the oldest sources of fuel and energy that we know. Trees are harvested by cutting down forests. We know that. That's known as deforestation. And then the cut trees are then processed to create lumber for fires. Peat is an accumulation of partially decayed vegetation or organic material, and peat is harvested as an important source of fuel in many parts of the world. So the pros of this is that they're renewable if they're used responsibly, because peat and trees, they grow back, but we'd have to replenish them. So they are renewable, but we can't over-harvest. They're abundant in many places throughout the world, and it's not really expensive to get these things. However, there are some cons. It leads to deforestation, which means there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is not good for us. And then when wood is burned, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, also not good for our atmosphere. And then it's energy inefficient. It does not produce a lot of energy when it is burned. So key points, we know that the energy we must use needs to be mined, harvested, or collected from the earth. So for every energy source, a chemical or mechanical process is required to turn it into usable electricity. And it's the generator inside a turbine that converts mechanical energy into electrical energy and creates electricity. So that goes all the way back to this slide, which is really just the most important thing that you should take away from this lesson. Heat energy is transferred into a steam turbine, which becomes mechanical energy, and then an electrical generator turns it into electrical energy, which is electricity. All right, guys, that's it for this lesson. I hope you have a nice day. Let me know if you have any questions, and feel free to contact me during office hours or during tutoring. Thanks, guys. Bye.